Hi, it's Nero here from Investment Rise, where we help people invest in property to achieve their financial goals faster. And it's been recently brought to my attention about, some sensationalistic journalism out there, both in the online media world, plus also on TV, primarily about the property market crashing, and this figure being thrown around about property market dropping or crashing by 40%. And people are starting to get really worried. I'm getting a lot of concerns, from people who are going, look, we didn't necessarily take advantage of the Sydney market boom. We want to set ourselves up for retirement for the next 10 years or so. And if the property market crashes, what are we going to do? And look, I totally understand that concern, right? Because especially if you do have 10 to 15 years before you retire, you want to make sure that you put yourself on the right plan because you don't have time to recover. And so what I would like to say on that is, first of all, it seems that every few years someone, so-called expert, comes out to talk about a property market crash. In fact, I think it was 2010, 2011, around that time, some so-called expert from Australia came out and said that he was selling his, I think it was his Surrey Hills property, don't quote me, but something around the inner city of Sydney. He was selling it because the Sydney market was overvalued and it was going to crash. And I think he was again citing that same 40% figure. Now, you and I both know what's happened to the Sydney market since then, but the problem is that there were some people who followed his so-called advice, right? And they sold their properties in Sydney, or worse, they chose not to invest and missed out on some amazing opportunities. In fact, I remember when I was buying in the Sydney market in 2011, one, a property spruiker who was telling me that I should be buying mining properties instead told me I was totally crazy for buying in Sydney and that the market was overvalued, wouldn't have any growth. So we've seen before people come out and talk about a property market crash. In fact, since in my 16 years of investing, I've seen people come out, 2004, 2008, 2012, almost every time there's an Olympic Games coming out to talking about a property market crash, and now they're doing it again. But then people are going, yeah, look, yes, they've been wrong before, but what if they're right now? Right now, the old adage of a broken clock is right twice a day. Same way, are these guys finally, are they correct? And so what I want to look at is, what are the three things it takes for a property market to crash, right? Number one, no more demand. So in other words, people don't want to live there anymore. Now, last I checked, Sydney and Melbourne's populations were still growing. Yes, the rate of population growth has slowed down. Yes, Brisbane has overtaken Sydney and Melbourne as being the fastest growing city in Australia, primarily due to domestic migration. That's because a lot of people in Sydney and Melbourne just can't afford properties anymore, or they can see some amazing value up in Brisbane, and that's what they're moving up there, which is what's driving price up higher in Brisbane. But Sydney and Melbourne still rank quite highly among the top 10 most livable cities in the world that people want to live in. Migration, there's always excess demand for migration. If the Australian government was to lift any restrictions that they have right now on migration, you'd see more and more people wanting to come and live in Sydney and Melbourne. So people still want to live here. So that's the first thing. So as long as people want to live here, it's always going to create some kind of floor on property prices, because there's always this demand. But then the second thing that could cause our prices to crash is if there were no more jobs. So, for example, if the government decided that they were going to force all of the large private companies, the large banks, the major international companies who've set up shop in Sydney and Melbourne to move their headquarters, move their branches somewhere to the back of Bourke, for example, and then people in Sydney and Melbourne couldn't get work, then yeah, that would feed into what I said earlier on about the first criteria, because not as many people want to live here anymore, because the jobs wouldn't be in here, and yes, prices would crash. But how likely is that going to happen? How likely is the government going to make a decision to say, look, we don't want any more prices, any more jobs in Sydney and Melbourne, all you private companies, move your headquarters out? It's just not going to happen, right? Okay, so it's demand for a property, people want to live here. Secondly, it's jobs. Third thing that could cause prices to crash is people can't afford their mortgages anymore, right? And that could be because there's mass unemployment, mass redundancies due to maybe some sort of financial crisis like what we had globally around about 2008, which, by the way, Sydney and Melbourne weathered quite well, or it could be because interest rates rise rapidly. But again, think about it. The Reserve Bank has kept interest rates at 1.5%, record lows now for forever, for the longest period on record. Yes, they do know that they have spoken about increasing interest rates, but they're in no hurry to do so. So when you look at the factors that are out there that are talking about, that will take for prices to crash, how likely is that for it to happen? I mean, forget all these figures about a debt to income ratio and having a debt level of $1.7 trillion in Australia, which is a high number until you consider that our property value is like 4 times that. So our debt levels are about roughly at 25 to 30% of the property value. So forget the figures. It's very easy to get drawn in by sensationalism, sensationalistic journalism. I can't get those words out, but you know what I mean. Instead, as an investor, you need to separate yourself from that. You need to separate yourself from the emotions. You need to separate yourself from the headlines that people are looking for clickbait, and look at the facts. So no, the Sydney and Melbourne markets are not going to crash. However, that doesn't mean that necessarily now is the time to enter those markets if you're looking to invest, especially if you are looking to use property as your investment vehicle to set yourself up for retirement within sort of the next 10 to 15 years. So if you're sort of in that over 40 age group, 40, 45, looking to retire by the time you're 55 or 60, and you want to do it using investment property and using a simple buy and hold strategy, you can definitely do it, but doing so in Sydney and Melbourne, those markets are not going to necessarily give you the gains that you will be looking for in order to set yourself up for retirement. Though the opportunity for those two markets has well and truly gone. However, that doesn't mean that there are other markets out there that aren't rising right now. And so as long as you do your research, you get the right help, you can certainly find opportunities where markets are rising in value right now and also have great potential for future price growth. So do your due diligence. Look, we've helped a number of clients recently buy properties at price point about $450,000, and you're probably thinking, wait, you can't even get a garden shed for that. But for example, we recently helped this couple, both of them in their mid-40s, looking to retire, bought one investment property, bought it under $450,000, and recently got it revalued, and they've already made an equity gain in just the last 12 to 18 months since they bought. So there are markets out there that are rising, that are far more affordable than Sydney and Melbourne. But yes, you need to do your due diligence, but definitely as an investor, especially if you're looking to use investment property as your vehicle to be able to retire over the next sort of 10 to 15 years, separate yourself from the journalism out there, separate yourself from the emotion. Don't try and copy what others have done. Instead, look to the future, look to where places have got potential for future capital growth. Do your due diligence. Don't invest on emotion, invest on data, and you'll be able to find that there's some great opportunities out there for you to set yourself up for retirement over the next 10 to 15 years. I really hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoy making it for you. If you think you can help someone else, please share it out there, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now.